Let's open up this Senate Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee and have a roll call, please.
Senator Cooper?
Here.
Senator Jones?
Here.
Senator Nethercutt?
Here.
Senator Rothfuss?
Excused.
Chairman Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We are on the continuation of House Bill 183, and I think we have a lot of people that want to talk on it. And we have a lot of people on Zoom that want to talk about it. So how many people want to talk about House Bill 183? A bunch. Okay, well, we'll see how it goes. I may have to limit it to 2 minutes, but we'll see how it goes. Let's go ahead and open up the public comment. We're at that point, and we've been through quite a bit of public comment, but let's go ahead and hear some more. Go ahead. And before we do, let me introduce the legislators in the room. Representative Heinert, and I thought I saw, Representative Larson sitting right there. Yeah. He's so small, I missed him. Are there any others? I don't think there are. Okay, all right.
Chairman, committee members, I'm Tim Teichert. I'm from Cokeville, Wyoming, part of Teichert Brothers Ranch there in Cokeville. It's my brother and myself. We're in favor of this net metering. We were approached from a group from Utah to come and put solar in there. We put in a solar unit on our hay barn, 231 kilowatts, before they realized that net metering is not allowed in Wyoming. We pay roughly $80,000 each year in power to run our pivots and things like this. With the rate increases every year, it's getting to the point that it's not economical to do that. $80,000 would bring home at least 2 of my kids to be able to ranch. I mean, that's a lot. In 10 years, that's $800,000. In 20 years, that's $1.6 million. That's the make or break of an ag program for us. One of the gentlemen on Friday that got up here, and he talked about subsidization of this, that if we allow this, everybody else is going to have to subsidize those who use the net metering. And that's not true. In our situation, we had to put in the power line at our expense to our pivots. We had to pay for that. When we went to Rocky Mountain Power, they were going to charge us $1.6 million to put in a power line. We were able to do it for about $600,000. We own that line and we have that. But part of the subsidization that would have taken place is we were going to have to make it so everybody along that line was going to be able to go from single phase to 3-phase at our expense. So I don't know who they're talking about being subsidized. Rocky Mountain Power with Pacific Corp in last year, in 2024, just in the third quarter, up to the third quarter, they were $3.68 billion net profit. Warren Buffett's doing fine. If we continue to have policies for California and Oregon, instead of the individuals, the ranchers, the small businesses here in Wyoming, it doesn't benefit us. This doesn't benefit us to just sit there and care what Oregon and California thinks. And that's one of the things that has just been frustrating. The bureaucracy that Rocky Mountain Power has, this is just my net metering bill. This is the paperwork that I have to do to fill out their form. If I sell the power to them, I'm going to get less than a penny per kilowatt hour. They're going to charge me 9 to 10 cents. I can't send that power across the street to the widow. They have to pay full price. And every year they're going to continue to come back and ask for more and more and more. We can't do that on the ranching program and go to the Public Service Commission and say we need a raise. And that's why I just feel this net metering, this is a step. It's not the only step, but we need to be fair. We need to level the playing field for the ranchers and the small businesses in Wyoming, and would appreciate it if you support this bill. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kaiser, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kaiser? Questions for Mr. Kaiser? Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Next. Go ahead.
Thornock from Cokeville, Wyoming, neighbors with Tim Teichert. I'm going to take a little bit of credit for us being here today. I brought this to Representative Heiner a couple of years ago. The issue we were having, there was some funding available and some tax incentives available to put in these net metering systems, but we had a cap at 25 kilowatts that nullified, that made the program not work. So I contacted Representative Heiner, told him what we were going through and what we needed, and he put this bill together, and I appreciate him doing that. So I've got just a few quick stories to tell you, to help you understand what we're dealing with as farmers and ranchers in Wyoming, dealing with these monopolistic utilities. They're monopolies. They hold tremendous power, incredible power. It's their way or the highway. There's no negotiating with them. They set the rate. Last year, they went in and asked for a 30%, almost a 30% raise with the Public Service Commission. Thankfully, that was reduced to, I think, 8 or 10%. They immediately filed a lawsuit to go ahead and get it back. This year, they're asking for 15%. Next year, they'll ask for 15%. My power bill now is $150,000 a year. I'm not the biggest farmer in Wyoming, by no means. 20, 30% on top of 150,000 is pretty big, and I can't sustain that. So this bill is immensely important. We were here for the hearing in the House, and we're here today, and I'd come back every week for the next 6 months if I had to. It's that important. I got to give you just two short, I mean, they're not short stories, but I'm going to keep them short, but I got to give some foundation for what I'm about to say. In 2010, I was a beginning farmer, what they call it. I bought my first piece of ground in 2010. I was financed to the teeth. I didn't have room for a lot of financial hiccups. On this piece of ground I bought, there was a place for a pivot and a pump. So I contacted Rocky Mountain Power, said, I need power here. There was an existing power line coming to my property. Their estimator came out and looked at it. He says, we can deliver power there for $60,000. We got to fix the line. It's going to cost $60,000 to fix this line for about $10,000 worth of work, but $60,000 they wanted. So I sent them, they sent me a contract. I sent the contract back signed with the $10,000 deposit. They signed the contract in April of 2010. My neighbor next door heard that we were going to fix that line. He didn't like it. He called Rocky Mountain Power, said, I don't like that. They looked at their easement. It was a valid easement. They wrote right in here that they had a valid easement in the contract. So they scheduled to come and put the power in. I ordered a pivot, put a pump in, spent $150,000. And a week before they were supposed to hook me up, they called and said, we're not going to deliver that power. We don't want to cause any issues with your neighbor. I said, we have a contract. I've spent this money. I need that power. And I don't have the financial resources.
Mr. Thorne, you realize we're not doing anything with Pacific Power here. We're not going to change anything they've done.
I understand.
We're just trying to do this bill.
Okay.
Can this bill help you? I don't think it'll help you with your relation with Pacific Power, but maybe it'll help you otherwise.
It will help me. And I'll keep this short. The reason I'm telling this story, Chairman, is because you're about to hear from the utilities.
Sure.
And I need you to know who you're hearing from. And I'll keep this real short.
Okay, all right.
They didn't send me a copy of that contract they'd signed. So they told me we don't have an agreement because we never signed the contract. They had signed it, but they hid it from me. I went to the Public Service Commission. Chris Petrie was the chief counsel at the time, told my story. Rocky Mountain Power sent a letter to Chris Petrie saying Thornock signed the contract. We never did. We don't have an agreement with him. I built a separate power line to get power to my place. They said, we're not going to deliver power to that one either. After it was already built, they said, we're not going to hook you up there either until you get us out of this dispute with your neighbor. Anyway, trying to keep this short. They lied to me, lied to the Public Service Commission in writing. 10 months later, during depositions, they pulled out the contract that had been signed. I thought that was fraud. I didn't think you could do that. They forced me to sign a separate contract in the interim. I sued them under the initial contract. I lost because I'd signed the second contract. So then I got to pay them $50,000 for their attorney's fees on top of that. The reason I go through that is because they're going to come up here and tell you that we're going to get subsidized if you allow us to net meter our power by other customers on the line. The bill has been amended to account for that. As Mr. Petrie testified last week, That's covered. They're going to charge us a connection fee to make sure that we're not being subsidized by our neighbors. I don't like that, but I think it's a compromise. I don't like it because they charge $1.6 million for $600,000 of work, as you just heard from Tim. They charge $7,500 to remove 3 old poles from my property that were done. They've been there for 60 years. I said, I'll remove them and I'll give them to you when you're done. What it's cost me $500, $7,500 for that work. So they're going to go in there to the Public Service Commission and say, it costs us X amount of dollars to maintain this line, and we've got to charge them this connection fee. Those numbers are inflated by a factor of 10 at least. And I've had personal experience with them. If they were sitting where you are today and they were pleading their cause, they could not care less what you had to say. They would happily break me if they, and wouldn't think twice about it. These guys, we need something. These costs are getting out of control. We don't need to be subsidized. We're not going to be under this law. Give us this opportunity.
And Mr. Thorne, you think this bill will help you? Is it by going to 200 kilowatts? Is that how it will help you, or how is this bill going to solve your problems?
Yes, I use 750 kilowatts per year. And so at 25 kilowatts, it doesn't even touch it.
Yeah.
But at 200, and then I can aggregate meters, I can get pretty close to 700 kilowatts under a net metering system and offset my power bill.
Okay.
And Senator Cooper mentioned last week, he was asking about just going off grid. Can't we just do this and go off grid, right? Or something to that effect. The technology is not there yet. I still have to bank that power. The technology right now will allow me to produce enough power in a year's time to offset my bill. But I can't produce enough power at the time of usage to offset me. There's few things that would give me more joy than to call Rocky Mountain Power and tell them to come disconnect me. But we're not there yet. And so I still have to bank my power. And I'm happy to pay a connection fee or whatever. I'm just afraid that's going to get abused.
Okay. All right. Well, we hope this bill will help you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Thumb. Any questions for Mr. Thorne? Questions? Nope. Thank you very much. Who's next? Who else would like to speak on House Bill 183, net metering amendments?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Burrows. I'm here representing the Wyoming Outdoor Council, and we are Wyoming's oldest independent conservation organization. We represent thousands of members around the state, and we stand in support of this bill. And I'd offer several reasons why. The first, really, as you just heard, this bill expands one of the few tools that Wyomingites have to lower their energy bills by producing their own electricity. And we think it's really important in this conversation to just keep in mind that net metering customers are producing that electricity on their own equipment that they pay for themselves, and that these systems are being designed to meet the needs of the customer. In conversations that we've had around the state in different communities and with our members, it's very clear that the 25 kilowatt cap on net meter systems, although it's typically fine for residential customers, is a limiting factor, not just for ag producers, but also for local governments, school districts, and small businesses to invest in their own energy generation and reduce electricity bills. And second, and I think really important for this conversation in this bill, one of the things that we appreciate is just that it's really pulling us into parity with what other states around us are doing around net metering. And I'd offer three really quick examples. In both Utah and Oregon, the net metering cap for non-residential customers is 2 megawatts. And aggregation is allowed. In North Dakota, that cap is 100 kilowatts, and that's for both residential and non-residential customers. So this bill really sets up a better system that is more in line with the opportunities of those in other states surrounding Wyoming. And then finally, we think that many of the concerns that you've heard from utilities can be addressed through this additional fee mechanism that's in the bill. That was an amendment on the House side. And we support the measures to have the Public Service Commission approve these fees. And we thank you for your time. We hope you'll support this bill. Happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson.
I saw another one. Oh, over there.
And then, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to just tee up the PSC, Mr. Petrie, to discuss that fee provision next. Thanks.
Please
Mr. Chairman.
identify yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Andy Schwartz. I'm representing the town of Jackson today. The town of Jackson is in strong support of this bill. We have been for many years in a cooperative agreement with Teton County, the town, and Lower Valley, our energy provider. And the core of that cooperation is trying to limit the increase in use of the power from the utility so they're not forced to go out and find more expensive alternatives. One of the ways we do this is encouraging net metering, and we believe this bill provides a more reasonable framework going forward so that people can do it with confidence, that they will be secure in the calculations they make. And I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Schwartz?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz, Lower Valley, what is their region? Evidently Cokeville's not part of it.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I'm not sure what the southern limit is, but it goes down at least to Afton. I do not believe it goes to Cokeville.
It does not. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Schwartz? The Jackson Hole representative. Oh. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Schwartz, I have a question. Are you finding this to be a cost-effective approach for Jackson to take? I understand that some of these people are wanting this approach because, this offers them.
It's not good.
Yeah,
Because this offers them an opportunity to get the power that they can't. But is this cost-effective?
I'm not, Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, I don't really have the ability to answer that question. It's not really come up. We are just cognizant that people want to do net metering partly because of this effort to take the burden off of Lower Valley. How they do their individual calculations, I can't speak to. I think there are others in the room who can speak to that better.
Further questions for Mr. Schwartz? Thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for your testimony.
Thank you, and it's always a pleasure to be before this committee.
Well, sure it was. Yeah. Why, heck, yeah, it was. Next.
PSC.
Oh, the PSC, are you ready to answer yet? Are you? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Petrie, Public Service Commission. Questions about the fee? I can explain how I understand this would work if that satisfies. Mr. Chairman, the amendment that's been discussed that creates a mechanism for the Public Service Commission to potentially approve additional monthly charge for net meters in excess of 25 kW or kilowatts it appears designed to allow for a utility who has a rate structure that might produce or that does produce a subsidy flowing from net metering customers or flowing from other customers to net metering customers to be corrected so that we end up with just and reasonable rates. And by just and reasonable rates in the utility world, we mean who causes the cost pays the cost. And so there are issues with some utility rate structures that customers in a class who don't use a normal amount of electricity do not incur charges sufficient with their consumption. So each unit of consumption, there's a portion of the charge that is meant to recover the fixed cost of operations. And if they offset all their usage and the rate structure is that way, then they might escape making a proper contribution to the fixed cost that the utility experiences. So what would happen here is a utility that believed they had that situation would come to the Public Service Commission and propose some additional charge. And if the Public Service Commission found that that was in fact necessary to produce just and reasonable rates for all customers, then that charge would be approved. It would go into effect and apply to net meters of this extra large size. And you know, we discussed previously that somewhere there's a little bit of different definition, but somewhere between 5 and 8 or 9 kilowatts is a typically adequate system to offset usage. What we're talking about here is something quite a bit bigger, like you've heard from some of the agricultural operators. They use a lot more electricity than a normal residential customer, to be sure. And so that increases that, you know, many times over, as might be necessary to offset their use.
Thank you, very helpful. Do you think that's the amendment as proposed to help reach this compromise is practical for enforcement?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I do. This is the core business of the Public Service Commission, is rate setting, as the statute is currently and would continue to be with respect to small, like residential scale net metering installations. As you see, there's a prohibition against the charging of a minimum monthly charge greater than another customer. So that mechanism doesn't do anything to solve any problems that may exist with subsidies on those smaller systems. You've also heard that that is a very small percentage of total electricity consumption in the state. It's under 1%. And so this, I believe, I can easily imagine rate structures for additional monthly charges that could be tailored to address any subsidy that might be built into a utility's rates. Yes.
Follow up? The questions for the PSC? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Petrie. Go ahead. Anyone else? Anyone else in the room like to talk?
Oh, she doesn't want to be up here with the utility guy. Mr. Chairman, David Bush on behalf of Black Hills Energy, Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power here in Cheyenne. This issue is one that has seen a lot of testimony over the past few years. We have discussed, I think, in some detail, and Mr. Petrie also just covered it. The issue that we have found with net metering and that we've seen in other states like California and others that have changed their laws recently, excuse me, is that cost shift. I don't know that calling it a subsidy is necessarily probably the right semantics, but it is a shift in that the way the rate structure works, because net metering is a rate-making process. It's a system. So our rate is 14 cents for a residential customer. Of that 14 cents, 3/4 of that rate is fixed costs. Power, power lines, power poles, the infrastructure that it takes to move the power and run the system, run the grid that we're operating in. The other part, the other quarter of that is the fuel costs. So in net metering, you're obviously taking out the fuel cost because you're getting it from the sun or the wind, depending on what you've got at your home. The problem that we see is those fixed costs are then removed because of the way that the net metering rate is calculated. If you generate a kilowatt, you are credited for the retail rate. The retail rate of 14 cents for what you generate. We credit you that, okay? So at that point, you're zeroing out the fixed costs that come with the rate that we have. At the end of the year, the true-up happens with any banked credits that are left. If you generate 10 and you only use 8, you bank 2. Carry that over to the end of the year, and at the end of the year, you are then given a payout from your utility for that excess power that you didn't use. That payout is what's at the avoided cost, which is the pennies. I don't know, I could phone a friend and see what our avoided cost is. You know what it is? 1.9 cents. So you get the 1.9 cents payout for energy that's left over. But the rest of the year when you're generating, you're getting the retail rate. That's where the shift comes in. You're zeroing out your contribution to the fixed costs to run the system that are baked into the rates. Now, as was just pointed out by Mr. Petrie, there is statute right now that says, and it's on page 3 at the top, Romanette's III, shall not charge a customer generator any fee or charge that would increase the customer generator's minimum monthly charge to an amount greater than that of other customers, those being the customers that don't have a net metering system on their roof. So their other customers are paying the monthly fee as well as net metering customers. And then that's where it ends with the charge. So then you go into, with this amendment that was added on in the House, unless a customer generator is operating a net metering system with a generating capacity over 25 kilowatts and the commission approves the fee or charge. That is helpful from our standpoint of having just and equitable rates for all customers, but it leaves a large gap of the majority of net metering customers who are in that smaller residential range. We currently have about 1,300 customers here in Cheyenne that are net metering residential customers. It grows by about 150 to 200 a year. So we're moving quickly in this town. We've got contractors that we work with, local folks that are great. You've heard from them in the past on Friday. Awesome to work with. We enjoy working with them. We don't have any policy or any problem with rooftop solar and people generating their own power. What we want to make sure is that the cost shift that does happen is addressed through rates through the commission. We've supported bills in the past to have the commission look at this and to work hard to try to figure out what's equitable, because it's something that people are very much interested in. And right now, you can generate as much as you want behind the meter. Oil and gas does this all the time. They can generate as much power as they need behind the meter. We don't have anything to do with that, no say. It's when you want to connect to the grid and you want us to manage and help manage your power, that's where we have to make sure that we're doing things fair and equitable. If you want to have it to where people are on an equal footing, I would say delete that III and let it all go to the commission, and all net metering customers would therefore be under the purview of the commission. We could go and talk to them and say, we think there's a shift. We need to charge net metering customers $20 a month instead of the $16 a month that other customers get charged. They can look at it. They're the experts. They can say yes or no, whatever. They know what their business is, right? So that's what we would say. I don't think this bill overall gets us to a point that is fair for others. I think we need to continue to work on this, as much as I hate to say that after the hours and days that we've spent talking about net metering. But if it's going to continue to be a growing system that people are interested in doing and looking at, I do think we need to spend more time on coming up with a plan that works and does address that very problematic issue with the shift.
Questions for Mr. Bush? I have one. if I'm a net metering guy and during the year I trade off, I burn up 80 kilowatts and you compensate me 80 kilowatts and we go back and forth to the end and I come out with, at the end of the year with 80 kilowatts. As I understand it, you'll pay me 1.9 cents for those 80 kilowatts. Or can I just roll that over to my next charge for the next month of 80 kilowatts?
I'm going to phone a friend real fast, Senator.
Okay.
Yep, that's what I thought. The law requires it to be cashed out at the end of every year. So you can't continually roll and bank your usage. The way the law is right now, at the end of the year, you have to pay out what's left over, what's left in the bank, essentially.
So is that a law or is that a rule or is that PSC rules or
I think it's law. It is law.
statute?
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's another thing, Mr. Chairman, that we've talked about over the years is moving that true update. Some advocates have asked for that. We'd be open to looking at that kind of stuff too. It's really, again, we're not opposed to it. We work well with the local contractors, the door-to-door guys that come up from other states, not so much, but which some of you may have seen that there was an article in the Cowboy State Daily about that lately. So we want to do it the right way. We want to make sure that it's fair and equitable for everyone, and that's where we are. And we're not sure that this bill gets us there right now, sir.
okay. Questions for Mr. Bush? Questions? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thank you,
Thanks for being
Chairman.
with us. Again. Yes,
Good afternoon, Chairman Anderson, members of the committee. Era Arano with Rocky Mountain Farmers Union. Rocky Mountain Farmers Union is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that represents family farmers, and we were founded to ensure that individuals in rural communities can compete effectively and fairly in the marketplace. All of our policies are member-driven, and our policy is clear on this bill. We support net metering, and we support this bill. Our members often operate on small margins. Electricity is often one of their largest charges, and sudden fluctuations, 15%, 30%, all the other numbers that are out there as requests are done before the PSC, that can really affect a family farmer's budget for the year. Those who have invested in net metering do so to sort of have a little bit of control. They're under that monopoly utility. They don't have choice in where they can get that electricity other than by producing their own. And battery systems aren't currently sufficient for us to have our whole operations on a battery system and be truly independent. That would be the one further step in the choice. We really appreciate the aggregation component of this bill. That's really going to help us, especially center pivot, other irrigation pumps, et cetera. So we would appreciate your support of this bill and the support of the small family farmers. Thank you.
is there other people that are going to speak? You want to come forward so we don't have to? I also see another legislator here. I believe that Representative Filer is here. Not here? Okay, all right. Is there anyone else? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Monica Leininger, speaking on behalf of the Nature Conservancy. We stand in support of this bill. Our organization works hard on renewable energy siting issues to ensure that renewable energy is sited in a manner that doesn't have a negative impact on Wyoming's wildlife and our precious sensitive landscapes. And we see net metering as a solution to help address that issue, particularly in the face of increasing power demands across the country and across the state. And we think this bill could have a big impact for some of those commercial power needs that may require more power or larger systems to meet their own energy needs. Been working on this issue for a while and continually hear concerns about cost shifting. And I would invite those that have concerns about cost shifting to bring that data forward and to really make it transparent, because there's been other studies across the state that have looked at cost shifting in Wyoming. And if you were to Google Wyoming net metering study, you would find that the study produced shows that there's currently not a subsidy between net metered and non-net metering customers. Many studies actually say that net metering could reduce the needs of ratepayers for down the road. There's a study done in 2021 by a grid modeling expert team that shows that if we had at least 10% of the grid come from distributed energy systems, it would save ratepayers $500 billion. And that comes from reducing investment in transmission and power lines and the need to leverage private capital, as well as reducing electricity losses from, say, a power plant to an end consumer. So thank you for continuing to work on this topic. Really appreciate your time and service.
Thank you, Monica. Any questions for Monica? Questions? Any questions? Thank you, Monica. Next. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Anderson and committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Scott Kane, and I'm here representing a solar contracting business that I own and operate. We're based in Lander, operate in Wyoming and Utah, and have 50 employees. This bill is an important one to us. There's been great testimony already, and I really appreciate the dialogue on this. I'd like to address 2 points. The first one is relating to, this bill really has 2 main thrusts: the increasing the non-residential cap above the current 25 kW level, and the idea of adding meter aggregation as a function into net metering in Wyoming. The meter aggregation, I thought, in my observations from Friday's committee meeting, there's a little uncertainty about exactly what that would be accomplishing. Let me just take a moment on that. And what I'd like to do is, like, as a solar contractor, we see customers expressing interest in this. What we see most commonly as an interest in meter aggregation would be like the simplest case would be, say, a rural property owner has both a home, a residence, and a barn on their property. They're separated, and because of the distance, they wind up each with their own utility meter on the 2 facilities, the home and the barn. And if they are both on the same rate class, that is defined in this bill, they need to be within the same rate class. So if a home and a barn are both classified as residential service from the utility, the property owner then has the ability under meter aggregation to, instead of putting separate solar power systems on the 2 roofs of the 2 buildings, they could put one system likely on the barn, because that will be a much more practical place to put a larger system on the barn roof that will offset the energy consumption at both sites. Remember, typically if a property owner has more than 1 meter on their property, they'll receive a monthly bill that will have several line items addressing the different facilities on their property. So in this case, we would have a home and a barn on the same utility bill. The barn, in this simple case, would have some solar generation on site, and that could be used to offset all of the consumption on this monthly utility bill. So that comes up fairly commonly, and I think that would be a really nice, it would help net metering function a little more seamlessly, particularly for rural properties, and we'd really welcome that.
All right. Questions for Mr. Kane?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Kane, I have concerns about just that broadness of aggregate. And so recognizing we have to strike a balance here, there has to be a balance struck. I've been dealing with this issue for 9 years as well. Good to see you again, Mr. Kane. What limiting language do you think would be appropriate there based on your customer needs for aggregate, and how to maybe put some sidebars on that?
Mr. Chairman, if I may answer Senator Nethercott's question, I believe the current net metering language addresses it really well. The meter aggregation would not give customers the ability to produce more energy than they than they otherwise would under the non-aggregated approach. Remember, without meter aggregation, that customer, again, to use that very simple case, that customer could currently put 8 kilowatts on their home, of solar on their home, and 4 kilowatts of solar on their barn, with the intention of trying to offset some portion of their energy use. In this case, in an aggregated scenario, they will have no motivation whatsoever to put more than the combination, 12 kilowatts of solar on their barn, in my case. And the reason being, again, as Mr. Bush pointed, or as Mr. Petrie pointed out, with an annual true-up, if over the course of a year that customer produces more energy than they're consuming, they get paid back at that wholesale avoided cost rate, which is not an attractive return for any investor in a solar power system. So I believe the same constraint that exists on net metering as it's now configured will continue to constrain an aggregated system.
Questions for Mr. Kane? Questions? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Kane.
And pardon, Mr. Chairman, if you would, I was going to mention one other thing before the senator's question came up. Do I have time for?
Quickly,
one- yeah,
quickly,
Very quickly, thank
Mr.
you.
Kane.
Yeah, this addresses the very consistent comments on cost shifting. I want to make a quick observation in reference to this bill. Remember this bill on the 25 kilowatt change to 200 kilowatt cap? This is addressing the non-residential sector. So the cost shifting concerns really are very much concentrated on residential rooftop solar. Commercial utility rates, remember, are constructed differently than residential rates. As you heard already, residential rates on a per kilowatt hour basis build in a substantial amount of the fixed or overhead costs of utility. At the commercial scale, things that are non-residential, they tend to be constructed out of a base fee, an energy cost, and a demand fee. So it's only the energy cost that will be reduced by a solar power system. The demand fee will stay largely unaffected by on-site generation, and the fixed rate will, of course, will not be reduced by on-site generation. So the opportunity for cost shifting is substantially reduced for non-residential or commercial or agricultural systems.
Thank you, Mr. Kane.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Travis McNevin, here on behalf of Basin Electric, but also more broadly, sitting in for Sean Taylor with the Wyoming Rural Electric Association, as he was unable to be here today. Keeping my remarks very brief, certainly share the points and the concerns that Mr. Bush illustrated earlier or shared earlier with the rate charge and how it is not associated, of course, under current legislation or currently drafted with the 25 kilowatt hours. And then certainly flag for you, and we have one of the co-ops online. So when you get there to talk about the reliability challenges with aggregation and some of those sort of things, that is more of an engineering question and why that could be problematic. And so with that, I will end, but flag for Precorp and that dialogue on behalf of the co-op cell within your Zoom, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Nivens. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mr. McNiven, hearing Mr. Bush's recommended change, if he had his preferred way on page 3, the removal of Romanet 3, does that also alleviate the concerns regarding the aggregation issue?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, I believe that moves in the right direction, but I would certainly defer that to Mr. Roth, who is online, and would ask that maybe he takes notes on that and answer your question if that does, as it relates to the aggregating and the engineering components of that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nathan Nicholas from the Cook Law Firm on behalf of Rocky Mountain Power. Want to be brief, but I want to address a few points as well. We've heard from other utilities, and we echo their concerns. Rocky Mountain Power has and will always continue to experience the same issues that the other utilities have. And to be clear, Rocky Mountain Power doesn't object to small customer generation. What we want to do is ensure that those customers are still paying for the services that they're using, such as transmission and those types of issues, those types of services. You know, as we've heard, Wyoming currently only has a small percentage of net metering customers, but that number is going to continue to grow, as we heard Mr. Bush say. And we anticipate that under this current regime, and if this bill is passed, that those issues will continue to grow, and we'll start to experience the same types of reliability issues that California and Utah are experiencing. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Yes, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Nichols, I just had a question. Over in my neck of the woods, you're basically out of power. I know we've lost a few opportunities because you just didn't have the extra power to give to them. How much would net metering help with that? Is it just a small percentage, or do you think that if more customers were able to provide their own power, that we might be able to get some more of these industries back over there?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, admittedly, I don't have the technical solutions in front of me. I left my electrical engineering degree behind me about 25 years ago. But that being said, I think that there's a question here, and hopefully we'll hear from the technical folks from Precorp about this, but there's a difference between dispatchable power and small customer generation power in terms of what's reliable and how the utilities can rely on that power on an instantaneous basis. Thank you.
No? Other questions? Other questions for Mr. Nicholas? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else in the room? Anyone else in the room? I think we've got the room done. We're going to hear from Zoom, and I'm going to limit Zoom to 2 minutes because we have a 2 o'clock hard stop. So,
And another bill.
Huh?
And another bill.
yeah, we got 2 other bills.
They've traveled from across the state. It goes up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can we limit them to 2 minutes, Sue?
Yes, Leo is online right now.
Okay, all right.
Can you do?
Limit your comments to 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm coming here today just in support of this bill.
Would you give us your name?
Yes, sir. My name is Leo Publitz, and I am with solar contractor Creative Energies out of Lander and Laramie. I asked you to support this bill. I've worked in the solar industry in Wyoming for 10 years. My experiences have brought me to meet with various ranchers, small businesses in Southeast Wyoming, Cheyenne, Laramie, Douglas. And they're all interested in installing solar to save some money on their growing power bills. The current 25 kilowatt cap on commercial solar installations really limits the amount of energy that they require to make it a viable investment. As mentioned before, Utah has a 2 megawatt cap on commercial installations. And I've also been directly involved with local municipal installations, such as Laramie Ice Arena, the Recreation Center here in Laramie, Fire Station 3, among others. And those projects could have benefited from larger systems to help offset their electrical consumption. While they're still benefiting from the installations, larger installations would have had a greater economical impact on the community. The 25 kilowatt cap also deters other key businesses that could come into Wyoming as subcontractors and contractors to help install larger systems. I met with a gentleman just last week. He runs a nonprofit to help fund solar installations for other nonprofits and schools, municipalities. And after our meeting, he told me that we had a great meeting, but they wouldn't be willing to come into Wyoming because they limit their project size to 100 kilowatts. And I've also seen other contractors that will not come to Wyoming because 25 kilowatts doesn't make it feasible for them.
Thank you, Mr. Puglitz. That 2 minutes is pretty short, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your
thank you for
testimony.
your time.
Next.
Anderson, other members of the committee. Hello, my name is Joe Roth, and I serve as the Vice President of Member Service for Powder River Energy Corporation, an electric co-op serving Northeast Wyoming.
And limit your comments to 2 minutes, please.
I'm going to run through them for you. You bet.
All right, thank you.
Yes, my primary focus is on power quality and infrastructure challenges. Under the existing 25K net metering threshold, there's minimum impacts unless the generation is concentrated in a weak spot on the distribution system. Proposed change to raise the 200 kilowatts for non-residential, especially with the aggregation, could create power quality and safety issues. I believe Representative Heiner and others have mentioned that other states have a higher threshold for net metering. But I also believe specific to Oregon, does allow non-residential systems up to 2 megawatts, but they require an interconnect agreement to address some of the potential technical and safety concerns for non-residential systems. For example, Oregon specifies that you cannot exceed 90% of a short circuit interrupting capability on distribution equipment. You must stay within transient stability limits, and you must not contribute to more than 10% of the circuit's maximum current fault. So simply what this means is as that generation grows, and so under the aggregation and on Precorp, where we've got some pretty long radial lines from our distribution system, as you introduce a generating source out on the end of the line, you are creating an increase in fault current. Our protection systems are sized that once you leave a substation, that fault current dissipates and it gets smaller and smaller as you go out. And so we've got voltage regulation and protection system settings that are set there that could influence our system that would require a enhancement or an upgrade to the distribution system to handle the higher, the aggregated, the larger generation that would be placed on the system. That affects like arc flash, for instance, which is the fault current that would be at the meter for our linemen and technicians in the field. And that is our primary concern. And I know I'm short on time, but it is really.
You're overtime. Thank you for your testimony, Joe. Go ahead to, is it Patrick?
Yes.
Okay, name yourself.
Hi, I'm Patrick Lawson. I'm a Northern Arapaho tribal member in Riverton, Wyoming, and I operate some businesses here, primarily Wind River Internet for the Northern Arapaho tribe. And I just want to voice my support of this bill. I think we've analyzed a lot of the buildings for tribal programs and businesses out here, and more than 25 kilowatts would be greatly appreciated and super helpful in reducing our energy costs. I have a 25 kilowatt system myself at home, and I don't ever have my meter never goes in deficit. I always have to pay a bill still, regardless. It's just a state that I think, the more the better. And I just wanted to get that out there. I support this bill. I think it could save us a lot of money here and help out some of the people that need the most help.
Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron?
Thank you. My name's Erin O'Doherty. I am on the City Council of Laramie, but I'm speaking for myself in favor of this bill, particularly about raising the cap of generating capacity to 200 kilowatts per meter for non-residential use. My position's informed by my 6 years of service on City Council. I'm one of 3 council members on the Finance Committees. As such, I'm responsible for reviewing all of the payments made by the city each month. And the line item that always stands out in every department is the electric bill. In January alone, the total was over 102,000. And so that amounts to about $1.2 million a year. Public entities like the City of Laramie have a lot of real estate on the roofs of buildings that they own. when the city put a 25 kilowatt solar array on our municipal operations center, the footprint was only about 1/10 of the space. So an 8-fold increase in generating capacity would have helped us tremendously. I believe that raising this cap will help all municipalities, county governments, and school districts perhaps to save money for taxpayers and ratepayers. Laramie's been around for 150 years, and we're not planning to go away, so its citizens can reap the benefit of the return on the investment. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Aaron. Is Devin Brubaker going to make it?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one. Nick is left.
Who is it? Nick? Nick Patrick?
Yes, sir. Can
From
you hear
Cody,
me?
you got 2 minutes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I live on a small ranch outside of Cody, Wyoming, and raise grass-fed beef. I have 2 active solar rooftop systems on the ranch that defer electrical use for myself and my daughter. And I'd like to see this bill progress. I think it'll help others in the state with energy independence and the ever-increasing utility bills. I also sit on a committee for the city of Cody, and we are working to increase resilience and efficiency in city facilities. Rooftop solar would go a long way in saving taxpayer money and preparing for the future. Thank you for this opportunity to add my support for this bill. And with that, I'll sign off.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for your testimony. And that's all in the Zoom, and that's all in the room. We'll close public testimony. I have not seen a bill that had more public testimony in my 13 years. I'm going to close public testimony, and committee, what's your pleasure? Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Move the bill? Seconded by Jones. Any changes, any amendments, any alternatives?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if we could have Mr. Bush come forward, just so we get this right. Mr. Bush,
Mr. Bush, can you come forward? We're going to get something right.
we're gonna try. Mr. Bush, you mentioned a solution that you thought would be workable. Page 3, Romanet 3, just the elimination of the entire Romanet, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, by my understanding, and perhaps the commission or someone else can verify that or tell me I'm not correct, by removing that Romanet, it would allow the commission to look at monthly charges that may be necessary for all customers of net metering, not just the ones above 25 kilowatt as the language is in here now. Because as I said, most of the customers that we have are those smaller residential ones that would not be subject to this.
Mr. Bush, is that the new language that needs to be eliminated then? Or you're saying the whole thing?
Just Romanet 3.
Yeah, the
Just
whole
the
thing,
whole-
Mr. Chairman. It would be,
whole-
the existing language is shall not charge customer generator any fee that would increase the generator's minimum monthly to amount greater than that of other customers of the electric utility in the same rate class as the customer generator. So as the rate classes go, where we have residential, commercial, and industrial, we are limited to what we can charge for that monthly fee, the monthly connection fee, basically, or the monthly service fee. And so what this Romanet does then is lock in the fact that we cannot address any sort of a cost shift that may be out there because we can't increase that monthly charge. Again, if someone is zeroing out their contribution to the maintenance of the grid through the fixed cost that I talked about, those 3/4 of the rate that goes towards the fixed costs of running the grid, we can't adjust that monthly fee to compensate for that and say, okay, you've chosen to have this system on your house. You're going to do it for these reasons if you want to offset. However, we still need to maintain the grid because you're still using it. You're sending power to us, we're sending power to you when you need it. You're using the facilities. Therefore, there needs to be some payment that goes into that.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I fully support that, and that's the only way it can be. We're not going energy independent. We have to be on a power grid. Why? Because I don't want to produce my own energy. I'd like to just flip the switch and let Black Hills do it for me. I think most Americans have to operate that way, and that's how we remain strong as a nation. But I appreciate the efforts for net metering. I understand the challenge on the western side of the state with Rocky Mountain Power. I understand the need for alternative sources of energy because sometimes those energy demands can't be met. But we have to continue to pay into the grid. Can we hear from PSC about this proposed amendment? Otherwise, it's be a nightmare.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Peters.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Netticott, the entire elimination of Romanet 3, that paragraph, that would include the language that was amended in, and essentially that would expose all net metering to the same process that I explained before. We were viewing this as preventing an increase in whatever problem might exist with a cost shift that might be exacerbated by larger systems. But in fact, this Romanet 3 is the barrier to the commission's rate-making options. This limits the commission's options for addressing those issues, and so other approaches have problems of their own, such as a straight fixed variable rate structure that's got lots of critics, some fans. But if you were to eliminate Romanet 3, that would open the door to examination of all net metering under these statutes for the potential cost shifts to be corrected.
Follow up on that question? Thank you, Mr. Peters.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike Romanet 3 on page 3.
Moved and seconded to eliminate paragraph I on page 3. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. No. That amendment has passed. Any other amendments?
No, I don't see that I need that.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
does this proposed amendment, would this proposed amendment go along with what we just did in adding the language here in the bill?
Yeah, just do it.
Pardon?
Just do it.
Just do it.
Okay. So I would move the proposed amendment, page 1, line 5, delete the word charge and insert be charged, and after fee, or insert have an.
Second.
I didn't get that. Let me see.
It's this, yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, for clarity and for the
Okay.
public, there's a second proposed amendment just to amend the catch title to be consistent with what we're doing, which is allowing them to be charged. That is identified as proposed amendment to House Bill 183 S001 that you have in your handouts, and that's the amendment. Call for question.
So it, on line 1, or page 1, line 5, it deletes charge, inserts be charged, and after fee or insert have an. That's the amendment? Do you have it, Sue? Okay, all right. Any more discussion on the amendment? Any more discussion?
Question?
Question. All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That amendment should. I have an amendment on page 3, that paragraph 4, I want to put in there that they can aggregate, but aggregate up to 3 additional meters. Up to 3 additional meters is what I wanted to say. right after aggregate up to 3 additional meters. Is there a second? That amendment dies for lack of a second. Yeah, so much for that amendment. Any other amendments or changes to the bill?
I don't want to do this kind of business.
Nope, none? All right, well, then we're gonna have a roll call vote on this little puppy. Sue, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 183 engrossed as amended. Senator Cooper?
Aye.
Senator Jones?
Aye.
Senator Nethercott?
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss?
Excused.
Chairman Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes, 1 excused.
So that, House Bill 183 as amended has sneaked by the Senate Minerals Committee. Next up is House Bill 181, funeral services. Wait, this is really going to be good. Hey, wait a minute. This is funeral services. Hey, you're killing me. Dang. Just like that, they all leave. All right, House Bill 181. Representative Larson, have you got some information for us on this?
I do, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. My presence caused everybody to leave.
Yeah.
It's been kind of the way it's gone today. Mr. Chairman, are we ready then?
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the Funeral Home Contract Investment Bonding Act here on 181 is, if you'll bear with me, I'll just give you a little history because the prepaid funeral arrangements have been in our statute since 1977, at a time when our state retirement pensions were referred to as old age pension plans, and the Department of Health was referred to the State Department of Public Assistance and Social Services. And since that time, the Department of Insurance has regulated these arrangements. And so the type of arrangements that we have for prepaid funeral options are really, one that's really common is an insurance plan to pay for funeral services that are purchased by a person through an approved agent selling such a product. That we have nothing to do with that in this bill. The next that this bill is really going to focus on is the purchase of prepaid plans directly from a funeral home. When a person buys a prepaid plan from a funeral home, the funeral home is not allowed to use the funds until the services agreed to have been provided at the time of death. The need for those services may not arise for many years, and the original amount of those of that amount paid are subject to inflation. And acknowledging the impacts of inflation, funeral homes are allowed by the Insurance Commission rules to invest the funds used to purchase the prepaid plans in a variety of approved investment options. They have to have a surety bond of 5% to cover the original amount. And the approved options that we currently have in place are a bank, a trust company, or savings and loan. So it shows how antiquated they are. And so if a funeral home wants to invest those funds in something more aggressive, the requirement is they have to have an additional surety bond to cover the amount that they're going to invest. And so that oftentimes takes away any investment they get on the investment. So investment options have changed over the decades, and our statutes regulating investments have changed to where we have requirements for investment firms to be fiduciaries of the funds they manage and to abide by the Uniform Prudent Investor Act. Funeral homes here in Wyoming, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee have formed an association and have the ability to pool the funds they each have from a prepaid funeral plans together, similar to what our treasurer does when he in Pool A, to get a greater rate of return. In the case of a funeral home, the funds are invested in a pre-need funeral trust by the fund manager. This trust is irrevocable, meaning neither the consumer nor the funeral home would have access to those funds until the person covered passes away and a death certificate is produced and the contractual services are provided. If a funeral home goes out of business, the insurance commission can authorize the fund manager to release the funds to that entity that does provide the service. Or if the family pays for it, they can release the funds to the family. But our rules in place since 1977 don't contemplate this type of action. And so what this bill does is working with the insurance commissioner to try and still cover consumer protection and allow for greater investment. It amends the current language to allow the funeral homes to invest in a pre-needs funeral trust by an improved investment manager that complies by the Prudent Investor Act, with language also that requires the funeral homes to inform the purchaser of the prepaid plan where the money's going, if they're going to have access to it, if it's not going into an irrevocable trust, or if it's going into an irrevocable trust and they won't have. So, Mr. Chairman, that is really the summary of the bill, and you'll see how that goes into play inside the new language of the bill, but that's the history behind it and what we're trying to accomplish. Questions?
Questions? Questions for Larson? Thank you, Representative Larson. We have no questions. Is there anybody from the agencies that would like to speak on this? Oh, is it?
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Jeff Root. I'm Commissioner of Insurance. We were approached by Representative Larson and LSO to modify the statutes concerning the pre-needs contracts. We're neutral on the bill. Our role in this is really to ensure that money will be there down the road for consumers. For me, it's a business decision for the funeral directors, but for the consumers, they think they're paying for these services, and we need to be sure that the money is there down the road, whether it's tomorrow, whether it's 30 years. And so Representative Larson and LSO, they came up with a number of amendments. It gives an opportunity for the financial company that oversees the master trust to loosen up on some of those restrictive investments. But having said that, with that comes a rule where we will inform all of those consumers. They can either go into an irrevocable trust or a revocable trust. If it's a revocable trust, they can get their money out anytime like they can now, 80%, they get 80% of it. If it's irrevocable, we'll be sure it's in plain language that they can't do that. But also the investments and the interest that is accrued there stays in that trust, and the funeral directors cannot get it out either until the services have been performed. And for us, that was about the best balancing act we could come up with to loosen up the investments. I'll note for the record, when I first became commissioner, we did give a list of government money market funds list, which we thought were very conservative, but were also could be appropriately invested in, and they can do it in that list. So it's not just the very few things that are listed in statute. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We've tried to balance it here because I think you'll hear from the funeral directors that the current model is unsustainable. The largest funeral home in the state is no longer selling them. What we have seen a shift to is people tying them to life insurance policies or CDs. I think the numbers I have, in 2023, there were 334 contracts sold. In 2024, it went down to 119. So they are in decline. I think, like I said, some of the funeral homes are no longer selling them under the current model. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Mr. Rood, Director Rood? Questions. Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Rood. I have a question for Larson. I'm looking on page 2 there, invested in compliance with WS 901 and 902. Is that some of our state?
Prudent Investor Act.
Huh?
It's the Prudent Investor Act.
Oh, okay. Okay, all right. All right. Other questions for Senator Larson, or Representative Larson? Excuse me.
Let's go to the funeral directors.
I bet we will. Are you ready?
They're right. I'm ready.
You're ready, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sherilyn Kaiser, representing the Wyoming Funeral Directors Association. We stand in support of this bill and want to express our appreciation to Commissioner Rood and Representative Larson for working several months on this so we can try to rectify the situation to where we're losing money with our master trust. And so I have Jamie Kirkland with me today with Davis Funeral Home in Riverton, and he can speak to any questions that you may have from a practical aspect.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for having us here today. So I ask for your support on this bill. This will help funeral homes, as Commissioner Rood talked about how the decline in the amount of these trusts. The largest funeral home in the state sold to a corporation probably a year ago or 2 years ago, and actually the 3 largest funeral homes in the state sold. But it's us, the family-owned funeral homes, that use these. And that this is what would help us, because on average, I lose about $400 every time I do a pre-arrangement on someone that's choosing cremation. I lose up to close to $2,000 sometimes on a burial, the way that these funds are restricted on how they can be invested. So this is what we need, as a better diversification of these trust assets.
What do you think, Mr. Kirkland, how much do you think you're going to increase your return on that investment? Or if you're getting 3% now, are you going to get 10%, or what kind of return change are you going to get?
It's a good question, Mr. Chairman. That's the question I do not know. We do have our investor that would be able to answer that. He is not here. But he does take care of trusts like this with other states that has shown very positive results, and with a lot more time.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Kirkland?
Yeah,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, who are the private companies that provide that investment service to you?
Oh, who's the investor?
Yeah.
Who's the guy? His name is Harold Grubbs. He is with financial. So the bank is Community First Trust. It's out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and then the investor Harold Grubbs is with financial management. It's got financial in it. Know him personally for years.
Yeah.
So they've been in funeral service investing with funeral service for well over 25 years.
Mr. Chairman, is this the same company that originally started the plans that aren't paying out and keeping up with inflation and time?
It is, Mr. Chairman, Senator Nethercott, this is not the same company. The first investor passed away 5 years ago, and we've been working on this for quite some time. And then the investor, Harold Grubbs, and the first investor, Mr. Don Williams, were very good friends and worked in the industry together. And we put this out for proposal when Mr. Grubbs stepped forward and took on the role.
Other questions? Other questions? Yes, Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kirkland, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with these contracts. So if a consumer comes to you and they prepay for their funeral, right now you're losing money. But what happens if you have the option to make more money? Is that a profit for the funeral home, or is there some sort of mix with the consumer, or how does that actually work?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Jones, that's a great question. So if what we currently do is when someone comes in with a pre-arrangement, and then we figure out today's cost. So say they pre-arranged it 5 years ago, that person passes away, family needs us to provide those services. We do what's called an at-need contract, so it shows today's cost, and then we reconciliate it to see how much we gained or lost. So some situations, it might be that if it gained, that money would be used for anything that wasn't prearranged. It might be used for ordering death certificates. It might be used for paying a minister. But otherwise, if it go back to the family, the funeral home's not going to keep that money. Or if they're on Medicaid, it's going to go to the state of Wyoming.
Mr. Chairman?
Question, yes, Senator Northcott.
Following up on that, it looks like on page 2, onto the top of line 3, it does go back to the benefit of the seller. So it would go back to the funeral home director. And that's okay. And I think that's interesting from a statutory perspective, because typically who I think would retain that, it would be the investor, Mr. Grubbs. Because he would want those proceeds, like any insurance company would. You pay in, you get your claim, they pay out your max coverage on the car claim. The insurance company kept all that money that they earned on those investments that they've been receiving and pooling. So that's the difference here, is that the funeral home director, according to this statute, keeps those earnings. And if you choose to apply those to additional costs to your business, so through other charges, whatever, but it wouldn't go back to the families. And I think that would be typical as well.
Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and Senator Nethercott's correct. So in this irrevocable pre-needs funeral trust, you've entered into a contract for X amount of dollars. You're going to receive these services at the time of death. The leverage that, or the hopes is to offset inflation, that invest in those, there will be earnings that come back to the funeral home. The investment guy has fees that he gets, and I forget how many basis points, but he's got a fee schedule that he has to comply with. Now, under current law, with this bill not passed, a lot of these pre-need plans are, if they're in a revocable trust, and so if you had purchased that revocable trust, that's the reason that they're so limited on how they can invest them, because those have to be somewhat liquid in the event you decide you want your money back. And the requirements there is you get 80% back. They get to keep 20 for doing that, plus they get to keep the earnings off passbook savings or whatever else. This is broadening that to give them a greater total rate of return in that irrevocable trust. Both are still available, and that's why in here we require them to disclose what options they have, and then how it will be invested.
And as I understood it, that we're trying to protect them from inflation, because there's such a long timeline between time purchased to time used. If it's a 10-year window, all of a sudden the funeral guy is 20% behind the thing. So just trying to make that up.
Mr. Chairman, I would say, to make it, not that we need this, it's also for the consumer, because this product isn't going to survive because it's not paying out what it needs to pay out. So the funeral home directors don't want to accept those prepaid plans because they're taking a loss. So as a consumer, if you want to plan for your arrangements and buy that now, that it's necessary to have those protections in place as for a product for the consumer marketplace. So it's a benefit to everyone involved, is how I see it.
Other questions for Mr. Kirkland? Or Ms. Kaiser? Or Representative Larson? Hearing none, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being here with us.
Move the bill.
Okay, we're going to close public testimony, and I hope nobody else in the room wanted to speak, because we're past our 2 o'clock break line. Let's go ahead and dispose of this bill. We will not get to House Bill 202. And I'm sorry you brought all your props in. Maybe you can leave them. So, sorry about that, but we will not get to that. That will be, what's today, Wednesday? Friday. Friday we'll hear 202. Thank you. We close public testimony. Which pleasure? Moved by Cooper, seconded by Jones.
Roll call.
Any discussion, any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 181 engrossed. Senator Cooper. Senator Jones. Senator Nethercott.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Excused?
Chairman Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes and 1 excused.
And we'll have Schuler carry this on the floor.
I'll help.
We, let's see, we've got on 183, we've got Boner and Pearson. I think we'll have Boner carry that.
Nobody the second last. Those things don't